started. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another community conversation with the YWCA of Bucks County. We've been talking about social justice, a lot of different things involving social justice, and I think we today have another really good discussion coming your way that kind of falls into that. I'm Jessica Gershenfeld. I'm the Social Service and Social Justice Coordinator at the YWCA of Bucks County. Just as a couple housekeeping things, any questions that come up during the presentation can be placed in the Q&A. So there's a difference between the Q&A and the chat. So keep all the questions in the Q&A. It makes it a little bit easier for us to track those. And then I think our speaker today might ask some questions throughout the discussion. So if you have any feedback on any of those things that she's talking about, feel free to throw those in the chat for everyone to see, or for just her and I to see, whatever you're comfortable with. But I think she would like the feedback, and it'll be nice to kind of see what people are thinking. So before we get started, and before I introduce our panelist, I want everyone to take a few seconds to recall a time where you witnessed someone be negatively affected, or you yourself were negatively affected by some sort of system, whether that be the healthcare system or education, law enforcement, any of those systems, something that didn't sit right with you about one of those systems. I want you to just take a second to think about that. And then I'd like you to think about two more kind of things about that situation. So what about that situation made you uncomfortable, or what struck a nerve about that situation? And then I want you to think about what you did after that. Did you just kind of forget about it? Did you let it go? Did you talk to your friends and family about it? What was kind of the action steps or no steps that you took after this? So these are just some things I want you to think about throughout this discussion. And at this time, I would like to introduce our speaker, Marcia Telthorster. Sorry, I know I got that right. She is the board president of Bucks County Women's Advocacy Coalition. So welcome, Marcia. We're excited to have you. And I think first I'm going to let Marcia kind of introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her work with the coalition.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for asking me today. I've been, I guess, a healthcare executive for 30 years, retired in the last couple of years, but I had worked at places you probably would all recognize: Doylestown Hospital, St. Mary Medical Center, Princeton Medical Center in Princeton, New Jersey. And during that time, I also advocated for my professional society, which was a national society. And we would, for about 10 years, I think I was on that committee, we would take an annual walk to the hill. And the one thing you learn about walks to the hill is you need really good flat shoes. I'm saying there are a lot of other things you can learn from this, but really good flat shoes was my biggest takeaway from that. But I also learned where everything was in Washington in terms of physical locations of senators and congressmen. And it was just really pretty inspiring. So when I retired and I learned about the Bucks County Women's Advocacy Coalition, it really did intrigue me. And mostly because we are focused predominantly on women and families in Bucks County. So we get very local, and we get very specific about the groups that we are trying to advocate for. Some of the examples that I will give later today may or may not be connected to women and families, but will certainly give people an idea of how you can take the ideas that you planted in our head a minute ago, Jessica, about what did we see, what did we not like, who was impacted by something, and then what do we do with that? So within the coalition, I've been working with, we have what we call umbrella committees, and they are jobs and education. There's health and safety. There's, we have get out the vote. We have basic needs. And I landed ultimately in the basic needs, which is about housing and food insecurity. So those are the things that my little umbrella committee is looking to take a look at. So that's my history. Oh, and then suddenly I'm president. So that's kind of what happens. And I will tell you just one moment here. This is a little nerve wracking for me to be doing this because my mentor and friend Tam St. Clair is watching today. And Tam, I'm going to give it my best shot. So uh,
You'll be
she's
awesome.
quite experienced.
Before we continue, I know we talked about sharing, we're going to talk about the Bucks County Women's Advocacy Coalition's website. So I'm going to share this one link for everyone because we will discuss it throughout. So that'll go in the chat. Okay.
Thanks.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, so thank you for that. I think, everyone on this call probably has a general idea of what advocacy means and what it might mean to them, but I do think it would be helpful to kind of give an overview of advocacy and what it really means.
Happy to do that. And I absolutely agree with you. I think we each probably have our own idea.
Mhm.
Uh, and part of the reason is that it's not something that's over and done in a day. It's a complex process, but basically it is a process. And it involves a series of really interrelated steps that take you from the identifying the issue, much like you asked us to do at the opening of the program, to the satisfactory, hopefully, resolution of that issue. And it can take time and patience, of course, because it's, again, not done in a day. I've learned through the coalition that we really do measure by 2-year periods. What can we get done in this legislative session? And 2 years is not this afternoon. It's just not. So I think when we do talk about advocacy, that's important. Also, advocacy is a process where we influence others, whether it's lawmakers, we could influence the public, we could influence businesses, you can influence a variety of people in terms of advocacy. And I think that's important to remember that there may be multiple ways to attack a problem that you personally want to see change and for the better for yourself and for others in your community. So again, the goal is really to bring around changes in laws or regulations, maybe in public behavior and political perspectives concerning your issue. When I was thinking about this for today, I kept thinking, what kind of behaviors? I'm old enough to remember people smoking in the management team room at Doylestown Hospital. 30 of us crammed into a little conference room F or whatever it was, and everybody was smoking. And you just wouldn't expect that in a hospital today. So that's a behavior that has changed. Somebody advocated for that.
Mhm.
And we have seen that kind of a change. So there are lots of examples, of course, that we can all think of and share with. But again, making those changes to a satisfactory resolution is what advocacy is all about. And it also benefits marginalized people, the mainstream, people really without a voice.
Mhm.
And at the coalition, we've been talking a lot lately about giving voice to the voiceless. I believe as a coalition, we always have done that, but particularly with some of the issues around racial justice, we are talking about increasing our vigilance on the lens we see things through and the voices that we bring to the table.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think, the racial justice and the social justice part of all of this is obviously near and dear to the YWCA's mission, vision, and values. And talking about people who don't have a voice and really thinking about not only being a voice for them, but also trying to light a fire in their voice because people do have a voice. They might just not know that they, have that ability to stand up for themselves. I think that's all really important.
Well, I
Um,
think it's really twofold. One, we all certainly have a voice. It's just how can we amplify the voice and
right,
help amplifying it, of
right,
course.
right.
Um, but the second thing is, as you alluded to, it's believing in yourself that
Mhm.
what you care about and how you go about it does make a difference, and it
Yeah,
does.
definitely. Okay, so then I think for the next question, um, what are the ways that people can get involved in advocacy in our community, and how do they go about that?
Um, and a really good question. Of
I'm
course,
sure there's a plethora of ways for
there
people to do
are. And
that.
of course, if it has to do with women and families, we'd of course like to have them join our coalition and become a partner. So I'll put a little plug in for the Bucks County Women's Advocacy Coalition. But a lot of it starts truthfully with identifying what is your issue.
Mhm.
And you really do need to think about that too. Because once you've identified the issue, then you can begin to strategize who you're going to help, who's going to help you. If you can amplify your voice, that's one thing again the coalition talks about is we speak with one voice, but we have lots of partners. We have 47 partners. I think that's the latest number, 47 organizational partners, and somewhere around 350 individual partners. And these are all folks that have agreed to our principles and the things that we're advocating for. So once you get together and you can band together, it becomes a much more powerful process than myself.
Mhm.
So one of the questions I would like to ask the group today, when you think about power and what do you have, I'd like to really ask how many of us in the last few days have sent a letter or a note or made a phone call to our senators telling them how we felt about their vote on the Amy Coney Barrett nomination. So whether you thought it was a great idea or a terrible idea, and whether your senator thought it was a great idea or a terrible idea, how many of us bothered to let them know, either in advance of it or after the fact, either thanking them or chastising them or begging them or telling them to call off the dogs at the beginning? And again, it depends. It doesn't matter where you are, but do we do that? Do we provide that loop of feedback to our legislators? Because I think it's so important that we do that. And again, part of the tools that we can offer is trying to figure out who are your legislators. We can help you with that. It's an easy enough thing to look up, and we should all know and how to do that. So there are really specific things that people can do when something is important to them. And it doesn't have to mean a big systemic change, although I won't lie to you, that's really what we're about,
Mhm.
trying to make systemic changes. But one way to dip your toe in the water is to try and do one thing, you
Mhm.
know. And I'd ask, if we all think we really are truthfully advocates, how many letters have we written in the last 3 months? And about what? What was important to us? Did
Mhm.
anybody suggest it to you? Did you look for them? There are ways to do it. We have a responsibility as citizens. And I know you and I are going to talk a little later about the power of the vote, but our responsibility is not just once every 4 years or once every 2 years or just the local election or just the national election. We have a responsibility and have to really kind of think about what is it that we might like to do. Another example that I'd like to give you is something like and you and I talked about this, the burning leaves. Um, when I was a young girl, people in my suburban neighborhood put the leaves in the backyard and set them on fire, and that was it. And a lot of suburban neighborhoods today, that doesn't happen because somebody with asthma or someone thought about air pollution and somebody advocated for a different way.
Mhm.
So we can actually see results from the advocacy of earlier work groups on these kinds of things that they have done. And so, what will be our legacy?
Mhm.
What will we be talking about, or what will people be talking about us as a community of capable people
Right.
as we
What
go
have we
forward?
done?
Right, exactly. So, so when can you advocate? You can advocate anytime, really. Always, I think, a little better if it's legislative when they're in session because you have more impact. And then the other thing too is really thinking about teaming. Who can you team up with,
Mhm.
and can help you and amplify your voice as best you can.
And I think when we were having our discussion before, our kind of preparation discussion, you talked about um, people being able to get in contact with the coalition about something that they're passionate about, to ask for guidance on how to, you know what I mean? Like, say, this is what I'm passionate about. And you mentioned a lot of different people that you could connect them with in the coalition that specifically focus on that.
Yes.
You know,
We have a sort of a system or a setup or a structure where we have issue specialists, and we also have, I think I mentioned the umbrella chairs. So the issue specialists, and we're always looking for issue specialists, even if someone has tapped into a personal thing that they are just passionate about. We can always use somebody else to help them with that.
right.
But basically, currently, I believe, Tam can tell me if I'm wrong, but currently I believe we don't have an issue specialist on surprise medical billing. So that's when you go to the hospital, you think you're a network, and they bring in a specialist who does something wonderful to you, fixes you beautifully, and then sends you a bill for $3,000. We don't have anyone currently as an assigned issue specialist who's going to follow that for us.
Right.
So are there bills about that topic? And is somebody paying attention to it? Because if something comes up or is about to come up for a vote, most likely we'd have an opinion about it. And we would like to encourage all of our members to send a note, whether it's a phone call or write a letter to their legislator to assist in getting that voice heard. There's another one currently I'm following, housing in Bucks County, which is a little tricky because housing, as probably everybody on the call knows, is really tricky because we don't want to believe that there are 500 people without a place to sleep tonight in our community overall. I think it's close to the number. We don't want to think about that. So the whole idea of creating housing opportunities in very expensive land areas is just a really big deal. Yet it's an important topic. Somebody should follow it. So somebody is passionate about that. We can have an issue specialist following housing, for example. We have people following the ACA and the changes now that are potentially looking like they might happen. I think November 11th is the date that it goes to the Supreme Court. We have people following a lot of things, but we are always able to take somebody with a new thing that we haven't thought about yet, bring it to our attention, say you're willing to keep an eye on it for us. We will provide training. We will provide a support for anyone who's interested in their topic. The other thing we do is on behalf of our partners, our 47 partners, when they tell us that there's a topic that's important to them, we work hard to see what we can do to follow and to learn from them. Why is this good or bad? As you are all very aware, I'm sure, that voting yay or nay doesn't tell you if a bill is good or bad. Sometimes voting against a bill is the right answer, and sometimes it's a little tricky.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we're really clear on what we're doing, what we're asking people to do when we send an action alert, and asking them to make that phone call or write that letter and help with this particular cause. It might not be your personal pet cause this week. It might not be the one you're following. But if you add your voice to everyone else's, we make an impact. So yes, and those are our issue specialists. There's a title. What the heck? We're very happy to have partners who just follow and make calls when we need it. And we are really delighted when someone really wants to follow an issue.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. So then I know I talked about really wanting people to understand what it means to basically, if someone does have an idea about something they want to change, what are the steps? We talked about, you can go to the Bucks County Women's Advocacy Coalition and say, I'm passionate about this, direct me in the right way. But I think we have a little tool that will be helpful, and Marcia kind of agreed to go through this about how these ideas become a bill and where they go from there. So I'm going to share. Is this a good time for that one?
That's fine. Do the federal one. I think it's a little shorter, a little easier to look at and to read, and it's not quite as detailed as the Pennsylvania one. Thank you for that.
You can see that okay?
Yeah, I can see it. Hopefully our audience can as well.
Thank you.
Um, but again, this is just a very simple look at how does a bill become a law. And believe it or not, it does start with an idea. You have something that you want to do, you want to change, you want to make happen, and you get the idea. One thing that the coalition is currently very excited about and working on is the paid family leave in Pennsylvania. The United States is one of the very few civilized countries that has exactly 0 weeks of paid federal leave. So there are 5 other states that have paid state leave, and we are looking really hard to have Pennsylvania become one of those. I did tell my daughter who had twins, I said, it's a shame you didn't live in New Jersey when you had them, because it would have been easier.
Mhm.
But maybe we can get something done in Pennsylvania. So you start with your idea. Maybe you want paid family leave. Then you find somebody to introduce a bill. And we do have people who have signed on to this kind of legislation. So there it is. It's starting. It's starting. Um, the bill then would go to a committee, and then that's when they vote to accept or reject it. And also its changes before they send it to the House or Senate floor for debate, or they might send it to a subcommittee for more research. If you can imagine something like a paid family leave program, their actuaries have to get involved. There's a way, how are they going to take the money out of people's paychecks in order to be able to give it back to them later, and who's going to determine eligibility? It's a complicated thing. So they clearly are going to have hearings, and they're going to need to know more about what the numbers look like to see if it's a fiscally responsible thing for the state to do. Then Congress or a chamber would debate and vote, and then they need to go, both sides have to agree. And again, this is sort of a simplistic stylized thing about how a bill becomes law, but there are some trading back and forth, and then the Senate and the House, in whichever order, will start the ball rolling, may wind up in committee in between, and multiple times, because people make different changes. Um, this is probably a horrible thing for me to say on this thing, but Jessica, I'm saying it anyway. If anybody's ever seen The Simpsons on how to get a bill passed, it's so funny, but I mean, it's not very instructive. But what it does is it's not nearly as clear as this is. There's writers and people that know somebody, and it can be complicated. I'm not suggesting that our federal government or the state are anyway like The Simpsons, but it's a very interesting and complex approach where people are trying to maximize things that they want to see for their communities. And it might not always be straightforward. That's all. So then the president can approve it or veto it in a variety of ways. And then the bill either becomes law or it doesn't. So it's a very simple way, but the most important part on this sheet is it starts with an idea.
Mhm.
The idea, again, paid family leave in Pennsylvania, because we don't have it. Do we think it would be good? Oh, yes. And maybe we'll do a whole nother session on that one, because it's a very interesting proposition for predominantly women and families in the Commonwealth. So it will be really exciting if we're able to move it forward.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. I think that was a great overview. I know we talked about how it could be a really, really long and tedious description, but I think that was a perfect overview of it.
It's really the intro. If we want to get really complicated, and as I'm following my bills on housing, I need to look things up. A
Mhm.
bill gets laid on the table. It comes off the table. Like, you're trying to figure this stuff out. At the coalition, we have people that know the answers to these questions and happy to help. So,
Yeah.
and we'll even take just plain phone calls or send us an email. We're very happy to help with whatever question you might have.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to get out of here. And then I have um, another question that I think also ties into everything that's going on right now. But what role, and this I think it almost sounds like a silly question, but I do think that there's a deeper explanation. What role does voting, and when I say voting, I mean in your, not just the federal level, on all levels, have in advocacy work?
And thank you for the question. It's not silly at all, and it's certainly timely, given the heightened awareness about voting. And have you voted? And did you drop your in the box? And are you going to mail it? I mean, there's so much discussion around it currently. But I think voting is truthfully the ultimate in advocacy. Um, it's it's really a strong statement on your behalf that you've taken the time to do it. You maybe not this year, but in many years, you'd be surprised how many people don't use their vote, uh,
Mm-hmm.
they, or they go in unprepared. There are a lot of things to be said about that, but it's so powerful, and so many people have really fought and died for the right to vote that I'm generally pretty appalled when people say, I'm not going to bother. It was raining. So that's just me. But I think the vote is the ultimate, and not just again on the federal level. I think I think it's a League of Women Voters. I for sure know Peggy Dater is the one who told me, and hopefully many of the people on the call today might know Peggy, who is a wonderful person. But she did a great exercise. She had us stand up, and she had, I think, 10 of us stand up, and she had 6 of us sit down because we didn't register. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so we can't vote. So then the other 4 that are standing there, 2 of them they were registered, but they didn't bother to vote. And the last 2 voted. I'm sure I got the numbers wrong. And Peggy, you'll tell me later how to do this better. But the bottom line is, if one of those last 2 people standing is my brother Tom, I don't want my brother Tom making decisions about things that I care about, because grew up in the same household, but I just don't want Tom doing that. And you can substitute Tom for anybody in your life whose opinions you disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
But Tom bothered to register, and he bothered to show up and vote. And he's going to decide where the money goes for government stuff, bridges and infrastructure. And he's going to decide what bills or what senators or what congressmen are going to get in because he voted. So the vote is so, so, so darn important. It's really important, apparently, to all of us in the next week, but it always is.
Yeah.
And it is the ultimate advocacy, is to say it's important and do it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. At this time, I think that kind of concludes the questions that you and I talked about that we wanted to discuss. So if there's any questions from any attendees that are listening in, please feel free to put them in the Q&A at this part. So I'll give a few minutes to see if any questions come in for that. In the meantime, I'll thank you again for this. This was very helpful. And I think for me, I feel passionate about a lot of different things all the time, and I'm always going back and forth on, what is it today that I feel that way about. But I think that I want to do some more research on the Bucks County Women's Advocacy Coalition to learn more about it. I know this is going to sound terrible, but I get the emails we get them from the YWCA, like our national, that are kind of like the pre-written emails that you can send to your senators and everything. And I'll try to go through and see which ones I want to send. But I think that getting into it on your own and learning more about it is really important.
Well, and one of the other things too, when we send an action alert, we try and make it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
So
And it is very simple.
right. If you click on something, you're going to either go straight to one of your legislators, or you will have some language that you can and should adapt to be your own voice.
Right.
They remind you of ways to communicate on the issue we brought to your attention.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't send action alerts daily. We one a month is probably a busy
Right.
for us, but when we send them, we really are looking for people to think about sending something out. So
Mhm.
for no other reason, if people think about becoming a partner with the coalition, does not cost anything to join, although we will eventually ask you for money, of course, because we're nonprofit like everybody else. But for the most part, we really want the voice. We just really want the voice. So
Awesome. Well, there are two questions that have come up. Kristen says, how can we engage young people who are passionate about issues involved in advocacy?
Kristen, hi, how are you? Great question, actually. We are looking at that on behalf of the coalition in ways that we can get young people more involved. Tam St. Clair, who I mentioned several times today, has been doing a really great job of communicating through social media for us on Facebook, and we find we can get a lot of um, multi-level age groups in using that medium. In my head, I'm thinking maybe we also need to try some of the other platforms, whether I doubt if we're going to do TikTok, but maybe Instagram might be helpful or something else, again, to get the word out. I think what I have seen over this racial justice push, recent racial justice push, as well as voting, is our young people really are engaged in advocacy. So I think a more targeted question, if I can change a little, Kristen, would be how do I reach out to young people to help them with things that I'm also passionate about. So, and I think we really sometimes have to do that and the reverse. Ask them, what are you passionate about? And how can we help get you engaged with this?
Mhm.
So, but it's a really great question. And we are absolutely looking at ways to do that because it's important.
Definitely. The next question says, how can we connect and get info from the Women's Advocacy Coalition? So the first thing I'm going to do, so first let me go back. The link that you sent me, Marcia, do you kind of want to just explain what that is? That's like and then we can go into, I'll put the Advocacy Coalition's actually website link in the chat now, as well
Oh,
as I think you mentioned putting your email would be okay
yeah,
as well.
absolutely. Yeah, and please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm very happy to take your emails or calls. But the um,
The tool that
say it again.
the tool that you sent, the link.
We actually have a how to be an advocate. It's a kind of a neat PowerPoint presentation that you can link if you go to our website, click under advocacy, and there's a drop down menu, and it will take you to a PowerPoint. If you don't have PowerPoint on your machine, you click on the alternate option and it allows you to read the slides. So there are 3 training modules in there, sort of beginners, middle, and advanced, and would encourage all of you to take a look at it. And again, back to Kristen's question about getting young people involved, I think if we can get them looking at, if not this document, but documents like this that will say, anybody can do this. This is not something that only certain groups get to do. We all can do this. And if we are really serious about change, and when I say I see young people doing this all the time, I forgot to mention climate change. People are so, of a certain age group at least, are so involved in issues related to things like climate change too. So it's not that young people aren't advocates. I believe that they are. But I would love to get a few of them when we're able out of COVID to visit Harrisburg or to visit the Washington, D.C., to take young people with us because it is really life-changing, I think, to see how it works. But the link that Jessica left you is for that purpose, that you can jump to that and see prepared education piece on advocacy.
Awesome. And then I did add the, like I mentioned, I did add the Bucks County Women's Advocacy Coalition's just web page in there, which I think will direct you to phone numbers, email addresses. But Marcia, I know you mentioned putting not your personal email address. So tell
I,
me again.
I'll put it in. I
I
can
was
do it.
going to say, put in the right email address. I had your personal one. I didn't want to share that. So put in which one is best for you. And then people can have that. And if there's not,
And you can all send it to my personal email address. It's just going to get filtered in with everybody else's. So let's just do this. So there we go.
there you go. Perfect. So I think that's all we have. I don't see any more questions. I want to thank you again for all of the very helpful information. I think most of the listeners who join these probably already know what they're passionate about and may know a lot of this information, but I think it's always good to, one, if you don't know it, to learn it, and if you do know it, to have a refresher and to be able to share it with other people to get more and more people involved in advocacy work. Is there anything else that you kind of want to leave us off with, Marcia?
Now, I just want to say to the attendees, thank you for your attention to this. It really is important. And Jessica, thank you for being such a skilled interviewer. Thank you so much for that as well. And hope that you will, all of you on the call will connect with us, at least for more information. We'd love to have you join us or at least learn more about us. So thank you again, Jessica.
Awesome. Thank you. And everybody have it's a little gloomy outside, but I hope everyone has a good rest of your Wednesday. Thanks, Marcia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.